Hey guys, in this video I'm going to be going over how to build a weapon for VRWeapons 2.0 and later. And for the example I'm going to be using Chamferzone's M16, which is available on the Unity Asset Store. So let's get started. First thing I'm going to do is get this weapon cleaned up so that we can use it in VRWeapons. And to start, I'm going to go ahead and take these bullets here, and we will be using these later. So I'm going to open up the VRWeapons weapon builder for VRTK. This weapon is going to use raycast bullets, has a couple different options here. I don't need it to be able to be picked up. I'm just going to hit the setup bullet. Then I can grab that and drag it into my prefabs. And then I can get rid of all of these for now. And then I want to put a collider on here in order to be able to interact with it. I'm going to go ahead and add a mesh collider, make it convex to make sure it's working correctly. And then I'll go back to the base object. This is a two-handed weapon. I'm going to check that, and I'm going to add a base weapon script. So that adds a few different things onto the object here. Adds an audio source, the weapon script, a kick script, which handles recoil, an object pool. This particular one handles empty shells for ejection. A modified interactable object VRTK script. It adds a grab attach script here, as well as a grab point you can see here. I'll talk about that in a minute. And the two-handed script right here. So let's continue. You can see here it added the mesh collider automatically as the weapon body collider. So we need to have another collider for the second hand grip. I'm going to go ahead and add that to the base object. Let's go in here and add a box collider real quick. And it's way too big, so let's fix that. Get this out of the way. Okay. Now we have that ready, so what we're going to do is we're going to take that collider, bring it into the second hand grip collider. It's important that these are assigned because it does some enabling and disabling of colliders depending on how your weapon is held at the moment. If you don't have those assigned, physics might act a little bit weird, so make sure you remember to do that. Alright, so I can get this out of the way for now. Now the audio source we can leave alone. It dynamically chooses the correct clip to play depending on what's going on. On this weapon, auto rack forward, that means that when the bolt is back, it'll automatically come forward. With this particular weapon, we do want that, so go ahead and check that. The bolt does move on firing. Impact profile deals with bullet holes, and I have one set up here. It's kind of a generic default, so we're good with that for now. Fire mode. You can choose between any of these or all, but for this particular weapon, we're going to go with safe, semi-auto, and burst. Fire rate 0.1 sounds good. Burst amount 3 bullets per turn. That works for me. All right, next up we've got the trigger. So this is our trigger. I'm going to go ahead and take a look at my transform values here, and when it's all the way back, it's like about -60 on the X. So we'll pull this in here to the trigger transform, and rotation was -60. And the position didn't change, so we're just going to leave that at 0. Okay, next up is audio. I packaged some audio files in here, so we'll go ahead and use those. Mag in, mag in, mag out. I'm just going to use AKM stuff, slide back, slide forward, and dry fire. Okay. Kinematic kick I have set at some pretty good values already. I'm not going to mess with them, but you can experiment with those, change them as you see fit. Okay, so now I need to set up the object pool for the bullet shells. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back to my Chamferzone folder here, ammunition separated, and I need some 5.56 casings. There they are. I'll pull one in here. Then I'm going to go back to my bullet builder here and just set up an empty shell. I am going to change the mass because those things are pretty light. So I'll go back to my prefabs, bring that in there. Now I can delete the one in my scene. and I'm going to add this as an element in my object pool. So I'm going to have 30 objects per element, which means there are 30 shells in the pool. And that should cover me for a 30 round mag, and it'll just recycle the same old ones. This is the VRTK interactable. Everything should be set up as required. You can mess with the haptics if you want, but again, I have them set at a pretty decent coverall set of values. And that's it for the base weapon script. There is one thing I forgot to mention. You can see here that the pivot point of the weapon is way up front on the weapon. We don't want that because it will cause some issues with two-handed grabbing, and also the recoil will not look right. So we're going to go ahead and grab all the child objects in here and move them forward. You can see the pivot point is still here with the VRTK icon. We'll get that aligned right about there. That looks about right. Okay, and you can also see it messed up the box collider a little bit. So let's go ahead and fix that. Okay, and while we're at it, I'm also going to change the grab point here. The grab point is where the controller grabs onto the weapon. So we're going to move this. This might take a little bit of experimentation. I happen to know some generally good values. 55 sounds about right. And we'll test this later, but for now, that should be about good. All right, go ahead and create a new muzzle object for the weapon. Go ahead and select the base object and hit that button. And we're going to move that forward. See a little error here. I accidentally hit the button twice. All right, we're going to move that muzzle to the very front and line it up about where we want it to be. Make sure it's centered. Okay, we're good. Now, the muzzle object. This audio source is dedicated for the gunshot audio. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back into our audio folder, and we're going to drag the fire audio onto that audio source. And then on the muzzle script, we've got some, again, preset values here that are good coveralls. The range of units. The bullet spread range is how inaccurate the weapon is. So the higher this value is, the more inaccurate the weapon is going to be. I'm going to leave this at 0 as an example, just to show you. But you can play with that as your weapon needs. The damage is, it interacts with the health manager script that you can attach to objects. For an example, you can see here, health manager, this thing has 100 health. All right. Now muzzle flashes, this uses a small object pool as well. I'm gonna grab my muzzle flash, put it in here. You can use as many as you want for this. It'll randomly select between what you put on here. All right, and that's it for the muzzle. All right, next up is the bolt. So with AR-15 style rifles, we have a dust cover in the way. And in the real life version, when the bolt goes back, it pushes this down. But we're just gonna move it out of the way to begin with here. Okay. Also, another thing about AR-15s, the bolt moves on its own when the weapon is fired, but the charging handle doesn't. So the way we're going to manage that is we're going to add the bolt as a child of that charging handle, so you can see they're parented to each other now. And then we're going to click on the bolt and hit Assign Bolt to Selected Object. Now this is going to pop up a little red box here. This red box is the VRTK interactable object that you actually grab onto to manipulate the bolt. So what we're going to do with that is I'm going to go over here and position it right on that charging handle. Hit set start position. Move it about as far as we need to. And then we're going to hit the set end position button. Now you can toggle between them to see where you're at. And then we're just going to hit save bolt controller. And that's going to disable the mesh renderer so you can't see it in game. Now we're going to go back over to the bolt. And you've got a couple options here. Bolt moves separate. Since this does have a separate charging handle, we do want to press that. And you can see it popped up another set of buttons here. So we've got the bolt assigned as this object. We want the entire parented charging handle set as the bolt group. Slide time in frames. This is how many frames it takes for the bolt to go from fully closed to fully open, and then from fully open to fully closed. So we're going to go with 4. 4 frames is a pretty good value for this rifle. And again, you can experiment with that. The higher it is, the longer it'll take for the bolt to go back in for it to chamber a new round. You do want it to start chambered. Now, what we're going to do here is the bolt start position needs to be where it's at, as well as the group. And then we're going to move the bolt back as far as we want it. That's about right there. Set the bolt's end position. We can toggle that again. And then we're going to go to the charging handle, move it back as far as we want it to go. Go back to the bolt, set the group's end position. And again, we can toggle that. Okay, so now that we have that, we're going to move this back a bit. And we're going to go back to that bullet that we had earlier. And we're going to drag it in as a child of the bolt. And it's all the way down here, so we're going to go ahead and reset the values. There we go. Now we're going to move that bullet right onto the bolt face right there. And then we're going to take the bullet and assign it as the chambered round snap transform. And just hit the assign round snap location. Now what that's going to do is set the location for rounds and empty shells that are ejected from the weapon. After that's done, we can go ahead and toggle that back to the front. And we're good to go on that. All right, next we have the ejector. This one's pretty simple. Doesn't matter where the position of this is. All that matters is the rotation. So it'll eject rounds in the forward direction of the ejector with these values. Again, you can change these, but I have some preset values set in here that should work for you. Keep in mind that these are values that are set up for a lightweight round, for a low mass round here, which is why I changed the mass on these empty shells. And that's all you really need to do for that. Just make sure it's pointed in the right direction. All right, next is magazines. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this because I want to show you both types of magazines that we can make. So we have 2 of them now. I'm going to start with simple magazines. Simple magazines have a single type of round assigned to them, which is seen here. And for this, I'm just going to use raycast bullets, which means this weapon will only fire raycast bullets using this magazine. So I'm going to hit Setup Selected Object as Magazine. You can see it adds a collider. It also adds an interactable script so you can grab it. And it adds the raycast bullet script to it and the simple magazine script. So we're going to give it, oh, not -74. We're going to give it 30 rounds. You can also choose to have infinite if you want. And it's going to use the raycast bullet script. And that's it. That's all you need to do for that. Now, complex magazines, I'm going to deactivate this guy real quick. Complex magazines are a little bit different. They don't have a set bullet type. So on a complex magazine, you can choose, I'm going to go with 30 rounds again. You can choose exactly what kind of rounds you want. Again, I'm just going to use normal raycast bullets for this. But if you go ahead and drag it in, and then hit fill all open slots with round in slot 0, that magazine now has 30 rounds in it. And if you want a different type of round, you can take these elements and replace them with whatever type of bullet you want. It's important to remember, though, that the rounds are fed from the top element to 0. So it's going to fire element 29, 28, 27, etc., etc. That's all you really need to do for that. And that's it for magazines. Next up is the magazine drop zone. So we're going to go back and select our weapon object, hit set up magazine drop zone. And you can see here it's set up a VRTK drop zone, and it also made the magazine itself not a child of the weapon. I'll show you why in just a moment. So the mag drop zone, the collider's way off. We're going to go ahead and fix that real quick. Here we go. Everything should be set up here except for the policy list. You need to make sure that you add a tag here, and then make sure your magazine has that same tag in order for them to snap into position correctly. That is all you need to do for that. If you need to move the position of the highlight or the in-place magazine, you can change the location of the highlight object here. That just uses VRTK snap drop zones. That's all you need to do. Bullet drop zones are for adding individual rounds to a magazine. Works the exact same way. And that should be about it. It will automatically set up the snap drop zone. It'll also set the default snapped object to that magazine that is no longer a child. So it'll snap in there in the beginning automatically. So let's go ahead and test this out real quick. All right, we'll grab our gun. Looks like I had the position set up about right. Test out the firing. Check the rounds correctly. Switch it over to burst mode. 3-round burst. And safe. There we go. Not firing. Okay, now back to semi-auto, and we'll try out our two-hand grip here. Yep, everything looks like it's working great. And that's it. That's how you build a weapon. There are a couple more things I want to go over real quick. First, I want to show you some examples on the VRW control prefab here. For VRTK, you can ignore the disabled controllers. For that you can use the VRTK interact controller appearance script and just hit hide controller on grab. The gunshot layer mask. In order to be able to shoot anything, you need to make sure that you have some things checked on here. I've had a couple people having issues with the gun's not hitting anything because their shot mask is on nothing. So make sure you have that set up as you need it. Also, on your controller aliases, some bindable keys here. You have drop magazine, change fire mode, and slide release. Drop magazine is exactly what it sounds like. It'll drop the mag. Change fire mode will cycle between whatever fire modes you have available on your weapon. And slide release is when your bolt is locked back and you hit that button, it'll make the bolt go forward automatically. By default, up is slide release, left is change fire mode, and down is drop magazine. And that is about it. If anyone has any questions, go ahead and email me at slade7@gmail.com. Otherwise, enjoy. Thanks for watching.